I wish to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people as traditional custodians of the land we're meeting on and recognise any other people or families with connection to the lands of the ACT and region. I wish to acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and the contribution they make to the life of this city and this region. I'd also like to acknowledge and welcome other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are listening today. Welcome to Safety Spotlight from WorkSafe ACT. My name's Lish, Fejer. I'm your host, and today we're tackling sexual harassment, sexual assault in the workplace, defining it in a workplace context, its prevalence, causes, impacts, and some practical ways to start changing the culture around these issues. Now, this podcast is for everyone, so we're also going to look at what your rights are at work as an employer or an employee, and how you can protect your staff and yourself and prevent it and respond so that minimal harm is done. This episode includes discussions of sensitive topics that may be distressing or triggering for some listeners. Please prioritise your mental health. Skip this episode if the content may not be safe or supportive for you at this time. If you or someone you know has been affected by sexual harassment, we encourage you to seek support from trusted professionals or support services. Now, joining me in front of the microphone, as she does every episode, co-host and a WorkSafe ACT Commissioner, Jacqui Agius. Hello, Jacqui.
Hello, Lish. It's great to be with you this morning.
And our guest today is Jo Farrell, a passionate advocate for women in the construction sector, carpenter, builder, former General Manager of construction company Kane ACT. And she is the founder and director of not-for-profit organisation Build Like a Girl Australia, which is an extraordinary organisation that works to encourage and support girls and women getting careers, rewarding careers in the trades. She's also 2024 ACT Australian of the Year, 2024 ACT Citizen of the Year, Woman of the Year, QT Canberra Social Impact Business Woman of the Year, and every other award under the sun. Jo, hello.
Hello, Lish. Hello, Jacqui. Thanks for having me.
Hi, Jo. It's great to have you.
Now, this could be a really complex issue and a really important conversation. It's something we want to explore. But to start, I would really like to frame the discussion by defining what sexual harassment, sexual assault is in the context of work. Jacqui, we might kick off with you.
Yeah, so there is a psychosocial hazards at work code of practice that has been implemented through Safe Work Australia and also in the ACT. And it states that sexual harassment is any unwelcome sexual advance, unwelcome request for sexual favours or other unwelcome conduct of a sexual nature in circumstances where a reasonable person having regard to all the circumstances would anticipate the possibility that the person harassed would be offended, humiliated or intimidated. That is the definition in the code. But there's also sexual harassment, which is a legally recognised form of sexual discrimination. Sexual harassment and sex discrimination are both unlawful under the Sexual Discrimination Act 1984 and the Work Health and Safety Act 2011.
So let's break that down because that's a lot of legalese, isn't it?
Yeah.
On the ground, how do you define it, Jo?
Yeah, well, I mean, sexual assault for me is more around a physical act of harm, you know, in that context, whereas harassment might be sometimes a little bit more covert, but it can be overt as well. But for me, the damage, the significant impact that regardless of where it sits within that space is still massive and still has a huge impact on someone and can be damaging in a lifelong way. So I don't think we can kind of make a distinction, or we don't want anyone to go, oh, but sexual harassment's sort of less than, or, you know, not as bad as. That's not the case. So I think it's understanding sort of, you know, the actions, physical versus implied versus whatever the distinction is, still has a massive, massive impact. And, particularly when we're talking about women in trades on the ground.
Jacqui, what stood out to me is unwanted in all of those things, unwanted anything. And it's from the receiver and how they feel rather than the intent.
Exactly. And I think that's a really important distinction. But if we looked at some overt forms, and Jo, you've already spoken about overt or covert, that are easier to identify, then I think it gives people an understanding of what sexual harassment is. So things like inappropriate staring or leering, which can make someone feel uncomfortable or objectified, is one example, or unwelcome physical touching, hugging them, brushing up against somebody. They're things that can happen in workplaces. And this is a big one, and probably Jo would have some specific examples about this because it can happen quite a lot in those traditionally male workplaces, making suggestive comments or jokes. That happens, I think, quite a lot.
Constantly.
Yeah.
And if you don't laugh, then you don't have a sense of humour.
Yeah, and exactly. And I've actually heard some women say that the way that I cope on a construction site is by being one of the boys. Yep. And that's really sad,
yep.
right?
Yeah.
Jo, I think this is a really good time to bring in you are in construction. You work in this industry and you joined as a young woman.
Yeah, 17.
So would you feel comfortable sharing a bit of your experience on that site as a 17-year-old and then going and how, using some examples, whether personal or not, I don't know if you feel comfortable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's no off-limits discussions about this, and I think it's really important to share. I mean, yeah, I was incredibly young and basically straight out of school and straight into that environment. And so I went, I was in a co-ed public school. So, even though through puberty we all navigate, what it is to sort of navigate the things with boys and girls at that age. But I had no preparation or awareness. I had no one in my family who worked in the industry, so I wasn't able to get any guidance around what that might be. And so, there was probably an element maybe of naivety, but also just an expectation that I wasn't going to be treated any differently. And then I got a really rude shock, obviously from day one, that I wasn't welcome, and certainly was made to feel very unwelcome and the majority of the time in those first couple of years, very unsafe. And so, the suggestive comments, they weren't sort of mildly suggestive. They were incredibly direct. The behaviours, the getting in the space, when Jacqui spoke a moment about touching and everything else, what I found is that men would invade my personal space, and if I tried to create a boundary by stepping back out of that, it just kept coming and coming and coming, and that sort of crowding feeling and so forth. And all of that is around intimidation and making you feel uncomfortable and, trying to get a reaction as well, because it became a sport, for the guys on site to try and see how uncomfortable they could make me and what would make me react, because then the reaction was, oh, well, that's a great laugh, isn't it? Because we got something. And so it was really hard for me because you're 17 years old, you're navigating an adult space. I was working with guys who, were sort of, there was a couple around my age, maybe a couple of years older, and then guys into their 40s or 50s. And so there was a broad spectrum, and there wasn't any, I can't sort of pinpoint to say there's any one kind of person that does it. There's no distinct demographic, different cultures, different backgrounds, different ages, different things. It doesn't seem to make a difference. It comes down to a person having a mindset of this is okay. And on that site, there wasn't a single person who said it wasn't okay. So for me, it was put up and shut up. And so, I would react to some of those things when it just went to a point where I knew that was wrong and I would react, and then that became a consistent joke. So I think, and I know from the work I do with Build Like a Girl that as much as the industry has changed in the past 3 decades, that does still happen to young women, particularly young women, because of the power dynamic and the fact that they don't feel like they can speak up. So yeah, it's still there constantly.
And you made the comment about, it happening in different workplaces, and it happens in different professions
Yep.
as well. And we know, for instance, that on a national level, according to a survey on sexual harassment that was published by the Australian Human Rights Commission in 2022, that 40% of women and 26% of men in Australia say they have experienced sexual harassment in the workplace, and only 18% of them made a formal complaint. And I wonder, I was just thinking about that, Jo, because I've also had an experience, and it was when I was practicing as a lawyer, and I made a police report. The person was charged with indecent conduct. Everyone in the profession knew that it was about me because it was before the court. The reason that I spoke up was precisely why what you just said, which is we don't want it to happen to anyone else. So the best way for the people that can, because not everybody can report it and not everyone is willing to stand up and say this happened to me, and I understand why those things happen. Fortunately, he pled guilty on the first occasion.
There's two really strong examples there, Jo. You just putting up with it and thinking this is the culture, this is what I've got to do to get through this career. And Jacqui, you saying, I'm going to report this.
And I was a little bit older, right? Jo was 17.
But also I think there must be a lot of underreporting. In the stats that you have, Jacqui, on reports of sexual discrimination, harassment, assault, what is the rate of underreporting?
Look, I think it's the rate of underreporting. I reckon we probably only honestly hear or get informed about maybe 20% of what actually happens, and that's my firm view. And I say that in particular in relation to the construction industry and into the women that I speak to. Since starting Build Like a Girl in 2020, there's over 500 women that I've come into contact with. They've gone through programs, or and that's not just in ACT, that's in New South Wales and Victoria as well. So there's quite a few examples there. To give you a recent example of something that happened, however, won't obviously name names and different things, but a young female plumber who was working regionally. Lives in Canberra but was sent out to a job regionally out there, and all fine. Had been out there for months and months and months. As I said, third year, she's well into it, can hold her own. I've known her since she was at school. We got her to leave school early because she wasn't coping, got her into a trade and everything was going fantastically. On this regional job, on this particular morning, I got a phone call at 6 a.m. and she's hysterical. Couldn't understand what she was saying. And I said, pull over, I can hear that you're driving, just pull over, tell me what's going on. The night before, they'd just gone out to the pub, Wednesday night, schnitty night. That's what they've been doing for months on end, every single Wednesday night. On this particular night, when they got back to the hotel, two of her work crew that she's worked with for a long, long time decided to try and kick a door in and assault her. So for whatever reason, at this point in time, the dynamic has changed. There's obviously been a thought in their head around this is, I don't even want to delve into really the process of where they got to. Luckily, she made enough noise that other people then woke up, came to see what was going on. The owners of the motel actually went, you come and sleep in our wing of the motel tonight so we can keep you safe, and then we'll deal with it. First thing she did in the morning, as soon as she woke up, packed her stuff, jumped in the car and drove. And the first words out of her mouth to me was, I've just lost my job, haven't I? That was the first thing she said on the phone once I finally calmed her down. That was her first concern. And I was like, absolutely not. These are the steps we have to go through. So I've been supporting her since. She has not come back to the industry. She ended up taking time off. We navigated all that sort of side of it. She's since had a baby, and I sort of keep in touch with her to say, would you consider coming back? And the answer is, I don't know. Within the week that I got that phone call from her, I had 3 other incidences happen, which were very, very similar. And the thing that sort of frustrates me a little bit is that, yes, we know that there's positive things happening in the construction industry. Yes, we know there's a lot of things being done. There's not just Build Like a Girl, there's NAWIC, there's, all of these other organisations like yourselves who are doing all of this work to make the space better. But we cannot be complacent with the reality of this is happening. And it's happening because we know that it's a problem in our society and community. It gets distilled into construction because it's male dominated and because we make excuses for this, right? And when I have the conversations with guys around this and they go, oh, but not all of us behave like that. And I'm like, okay, we're getting to the hashtag not all men scenario, right? And whenever I get up and do public speaking and I talk about my experiences, I talk about when I was stuck in a toilet cubicle on a site of 250 men and I was the only female, and I had 4 guys outside that cubicle threatening me as a 19-year-old of the things I was going to do if I decided to come out. And that was happening, and I had a full-blown panic attack in the toilet, and there were people coming into that toilet block, using the urinal and walking back out. They could see and hear what was going on that whole time. They would come in, they would do what they needed to do and walk back out and go, that's not my problem, I'm not getting involved. And it wasn't until probably about 45 minutes into that episode when I just went, this is it for me. If this is what the construction industry is, I'm out. But I just need to get myself out of this toilet block safely somehow, and I don't know how I'm going to do that. So I was in a complete emotional state. And finally heard a big kerfuffle, lots of yelling and carry on and a bit of push and shove, and then finally heard this guy go, Joe, you can come out now. And the construction manager on the job at the time, who I'm still best mates with now, I call him Uncle Jeff, I use this story again and again and again when I get up and speak. It's highly traumatic, but what it demonstrates is when people say to me, oh, but not all the guys are like that, I know that. I wouldn't have stayed in an industry for almost 30 years if I thought you were all like that. But guess what? You are so quiet, and all of the people that walked into there saw what was going on and walked back out. How do I distinguish the difference? And so I always ask people in the audience when I'm speaking, go, okay, so I just want you to stop and reflect for a second in this scenario. Were you the guys outside the door, threatening, saying all these things, telling me all the things you were going to do if I dared, looking through the crack in the door? Were you the ones walking in, walking out, going, not my problem, not going to get involved? Or were you the one man out of 250 men on that site who decided to walk in and say, absolutely not? The issue that we have when we get stuck in this, oh, but it's not all of us. I know it's not all of you, but my God, you are so quiet. Why aren't you speaking up? And why aren't you taking all the power and privilege that comes with being a man in construction to help us? Because it can't just be my fight. It can't just be those girls who are going through those incidents and going, I'm about to lose my job. When you're standing there silent going, oh, I don't agree with it, but I'm not going to say anything and I'm not going to step in. So, we've got to get to the crux of the issue to go, we know that the underreporting is the 20%, and we also know that the perpetrators are the minority. And I firmly believe that. I firmly believe that the people in the industry who make us feel unwelcome and unsafe are the minority, but the majority are sitting there going, oh, but is it my problem?
So how do you address that? How do you make that quiet majority?
Stop being such a coward.
Yeah. And is it as easy as that? Because
we have legislation. Like, government has done their job. Jacqui has done her job.
The legislation is there, Jacqui.
The legislation is there. Can I just, and Joe, I just want to say I can see how much you're affected by telling that story, and it obviously happened, 15 years ago. Yeah. I just want to say sorry because I can feel your distress and trauma as you're telling that sitting across the table from you, and that, is why at WorkSafe we're really trying to do something about this issue that is in all areas of our workplaces, and we certainly see it. The legislation's there. The part of the issue is getting people to report. So Joe has spoken about, the plumber that you mentioned, and I'm not. If it was regional, it was probably not in our jurisdiction. But did that plumber report the incident to the safety regulator? And no, they didn't. And that's not unusual.
Again, fear, worried about repercussions, worried about, well, who else is going to employ me? Because if this filters out, I'm a troublemaker and, well, I'm the one causing this. So there's all of these connotations around the blame, that, regardless of the fact that they did it wrong. And I tried to sort of say, we can do all of this for you. You don't have to worry about that. We can find better employers who are going to actually, have the right values and everything else. But that fear and that stigma around it's still her fault, regardless. Somehow she's done something to encourage this. was there. And so, no, she was just adamant, and I can't force them to do it, and I can't do it on their behalf. And so that was really hard. I mean, we did get workers' compensation. We did go through a process of internal incident reporting with that company. But again, there was a lot of excuse making around that. The things that came back from that company were, this is just a misunderstanding. Oh, look, guys, sometimes they have a few drinks and this is what they do. There was this constant litany of, making concessions for their behaviour. And it got to a point where I had to say, and I hate doing this, but I had to sort of throw the threat on the table to go, do I have to publicly expose this to get some action out of you? And then it was like, oh, well, you're just going to use this as your, flag waving. And it's just like, you're not understanding your responsibility and obligation here. I can still pick up the phone to WorkSafe and say, here's something that's happened. Here's where I think it sits. Let's investigate this, right? So the power is there now.
And Jacqui, that makes a big difference because in terms of you as the commissioner and what WorkSafe ACT can do, what should the employers have done as soon as Joe raised something like that? What's the process?
Well, the employers should be managing the risk of that occurring prior to the incident happening. So we should be assuming now, given the stats that are available, and there's some really good research in relation to workplace sexual harassment, we should be assuming, every employer should assume that there is the risk of sexual harassment in their workplace, and they should have procedures and processes in place to manage that risk. And there are lots of things that you can do. Part of it is educating your workforce around what sexual harassment is, and that's what a bit about today is, letting people know these things amount to sexual harassment. It's not funny to tell a joke that has sexual innuendos. It's not funny to persistently invite a person out or engage in romantic discussion with them when they've made it very clear time and time and time again that they're not interested. And
it's clearly not able to knock down a colleague's door in the middle of the night.
I mean, that's an extreme version, right? Like, I'll give you another example. After I did an event down in Victoria, I had a young woman come up to me. She's a site engineer for a civil company, and she's has Indian heritage, and so we know that she's got a bit of a double whammy. She's a young woman and she's a woman of colour. So she's down the pecking order, right, from a respect perspective. That's a reality. We need to admit this sort of stuff. And so she came up to me after and said, I really enjoyed, your presentation and everything else. Can I just share with you something that happened with me? And literally, I think the week previous, out on this massive site, there was some sort of issue. There was a group of people that went out. One of them was a project manager. Her project manager's a white male and he's sort of mid-50s, quite a, high for her in terms of the hierarchy. And as they're looking at this, I think she said it was like a stormwater trench or something like that. He put his arm around her, brought her in nice and close and had his hand on her hip in front of a group of people looking at this trench. And I said, I'm not an expert on stormwater trenches, but I don't think you need to cuddle when you're looking at these things. Like what was going on? And she said, I was terrified. And she said, I felt awkward and there were people looking and it was this really awkward scenario. And then, it ended and she sort of, she said the whole time I was actually trying to move myself away and he had hold of her, right? And I was just trying to picture this scenario going, can you just imagine that for a moment happening? And no one saying anything. And there were men and women in the group, right? So it was probably a group of about 10 people who were doing this at the time. After that happened and they sort of split up and she walked away, a couple of people came over and went, oh, that was really creepy. Are you all right? So two things happened there. Number one, they made it her problem and her burden to bear in terms of, oh, well, this just happened and yeah, that was really gross, but hey, we're not going to say anything to him. And, it was just that thing of no one was going to speak up at the time and then no one was going to go afterwards and go up to him and go, that was really inappropriate. And it is highly, highly inappropriate. There's a huge power dynamic there. And she just kind of went, is that going to happen to me all the time? That was literally what she said to me at this event. And I just went, this is nuts. This is nuts that we're even having this conversation. But this is what is happening. And I think that, women don't feel, safe or supported or guided in the right way because we have the legislation, we have the backing of regulators, we have all that stuff in place. So there's a big gap between what's actually happening out there and how we navigate it as either the person who's experienced it or the people we can see who are doing it, and knowing that we've got all this stuff we can use. Like, we've got to bridge this gap.
Yeah, and I think I would really like to get to that because, Joe, time and time again, you've said it's this culture that's normalised, and you come from the construction industry, but I think in any of those male-dominated spaces, mining, construction, defence, manufacturing, so many of those, it is normalised, and we have to
Hospitality's pretty horrific, isn't it?
I was just going to raise an incident, a hospitality incident. So we had a report, and the young woman worked in the hospitality industry, and the report was that her employer would constantly get her to do things like bend over and pick up things and then make comments while the young woman did that. Would not allow this young woman to go to the toilet, for instance, in a 4-hour shift. So it was, and we've spoken about that before around, we know with women who don't have access to toilet or are unable to go to the toilet that they can be more prone to UTIs.
Yeah, health complications are massive.
Yeah, exactly. So some significant health issues there. And also would make continual comments such as, I love to see you bend over and pick up from under there. I want to see you bend over and turn off the PowerPoint. I want to, and an older employer, a young woman in the hospitality industry, the young woman wanted to remain anonymous. And in those circumstances, whilst we conducted workplace visits and we looked at their systems, because we can't actually identify the situation and we don't have a witness who's willing to speak up, there's very little that we can do as the regulator except to go and have a look at their systems and then to ask them to put processes in place for complaints and to speak to the workers and let them know what their rights and entitlements are and that we're here. And we have some young worker inspectors who will do reach-out work to work with young workers.
If you report anonymously, you can't take that anywhere. If there's a witness to that and that's all lined up, can that go further?
Yeah, so if somebody reports anonymously, we can take it further, but we're limited in what we can do. So if, for instance, that hospitality venue had cameras and we had some dates, then we could seize the footage, and that may show things that then we could take further, but it limits us. But there are things that we can do, Lish. When our inspectors went out, they actually issued 9 notices on the workplace, and those things were for system of work not responding to health and safety incidents. They needed a system of work for psychosocial hazard management. They hadn't had any fire equipment testing. They didn't have emergency evacuation plans. The freeze cool room bell was not working. So if someone went in there and got locked in, there was no way of alerting anybody. Their racking was all overloaded, which is, massive physical hazard. And their stock storage overhead was an issue, and also on the floor, so creating trips and fall hazards. So whilst we weren't able to go in and do anything about the sexual harassment in the workplace, we were able to go in and do quite a significant safety check on everything. And what we know is that if a PCBU has one safety breach, they're likely to have a number of safety breaches. If the person's willing to come up and speak up against an employer, then it's much easier. But, Joe's already spoken about some of the issues with that, people that fear or that they're going to lose their job. And in an instance like that, it would be pretty difficult for anyone to continue working for an employer when they've given evidence in court against that employer.
And that ongoing trauma and, insecurity. And as you said, Jo, some people have the whammies of several insecure employment. They already experience disadvantage, whether it's racial or with a disability.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously the social hierarchy, right? Which we can either acknowledge or pretend it doesn't exist. It exists. In construction, it exists in spades. We are an industry that welcomes just about everybody, but we also, have our own little internal structure of how we value people. I think we sort of need to understand is that we've got to acknowledge as a society and community that we have a problem in terms of how we view and value women, right? And that's prevalent in our family violence statistics. It's prevalent in terms of the opportunities women do or don't get. That just tells me that we're not moving in terms of our mindset, in terms of women's capability, and then accepting the fact that there's probably two key things in that. Number one, women are going to do a job differently by default of a whole bunch of, biological, physiological, mental, emotional things. Doesn't mean that we're doing it any better or worse. It's just a different way of doing. So let's just then allow that, and let's not have all of this stuff actually then come into play to make it 11 times harder or 100 times harder. So, it's kind of getting it back to a really basic level of what are we going to accept and what aren't we going to accept. And my frustration with the industry is everyone out there in construction industry, and I'll just speak about Canberra, even though I work in other states and territories, and it's the same rhetoric. Oh, the culture needs to improve. Oh, we've got all these issues and it's a toxic workplace. Oh, there's all these other, things going on and it's really hard. It's quite a negative connotation that comes with the industry in terms of our stats. The other thing I think is that we have to acknowledge is that our industry has incredibly high suicide rates, and we tend to sort of just focus on men with that and not the impact that this stuff actually has on women. I think if we started actually getting statistics around what this sort of stuff does to women in the industry, we'd probably be absolutely horrified. The retention, we can't keep women in the industry and retain them because of this being a major issue. The amount of times I wanted to leave when these incidents happened to me, absolutely. And luckily I just had the right people around me at the right time who said, just stick it out, or let's change it up, let's get you somewhere else. And I had those options.
You shouldn't have to stick it out, right? You shouldn't have to put up with it.
No. And it's sort of, people I know joke with me and say I must have skin of a rhino, that I've just had to cop these things and just sort of switch off. But, the trauma's there. It's absolutely there. You just sort of package it away and you keep moving on. But, it's kind of this understanding of going, are we going to acknowledge this for real? Because government's gone, we actually think this is a major issue, and so we need legislation in place to support how we stamp this out. Is the industry, are we actually going to be honest with ourselves and go, this is really harming and affecting people in the industry? The vast majority of us don't want to see it. So can we actually just find some bravery and courage and go, we're going to actually stamp this out for real. We're actually going to call this out when we see it, stand up in those moments and actually start doing this stuff, because all of that fear, all that inconsistency. I mean, one of the comments I got from one of the apprentices was, oh, well, Canberra's a really small place that everyone's going to know about it. Why should that even be a thing? And why should that be the burden that you carry, that you worry about it? Like, why isn't that being put on the perpetrator to go, hey, we don't actually want this person in the industry? I mean, one of the things for me was the times where I've had these incidences come up and I've asked their employer and gone, well, where is this person now? Oh, they're out on site. Well, that person's dangerous. That person is a danger to everybody else on site because of their mentality. And you've just gone by default, well, that's okay, you just keep doing your job and we'll just try and separate you. And it's like the sense of responsibility needs to be there. And yeah, for goodness sake, if we want things to change with culture and we want to fix all of these issues that we have, please start showing some courage with this.
And I think it's worth noting that when we're talking about men who are even more reluctant to report incidents of sexual assault. So those men and gender diverse people who are experiencing sexual harassment as well, if they speak up, then and everyone speaks up, then we're more likely to have more people speak up. A couple of years ago, through NAWIC, actually, I made contact with a young woman, and she reported some terrible examples of sexual harassment in her workplace. And the young woman was willing to speak up. Our inspectors met with that young woman and we ascertained that the incident occurred in another jurisdiction, was actually in New South Wales. So we supported that young woman to raise that complaint with Safe Work New South Wales. What was really interesting about that interaction is she had said to me, there are a number of women in my NAWIC group who are experiencing sexual harassment. I wonder, it's been really helpful for me to speak with you. Will you speak with them? And of course I will. If young people are reaching out like that and they want to speak to the Commissioner, absolutely happy. And we tried, it was over 18 months to try and get this group of women to come together to meet with me so that they could speak about their experiences. And they were all too frightened. None of them came. None of them wanted to speak up.
So how do we draw a line under it? What works in addressing it?
Look, I've been sort of pretty clear with saying that really where I want to see the legal stuff go is I want to see some mandatory training behind this. If we know that this is doing a huge amount of harm in our industry, we know there's significant impacts on the people that, this is happening to. We know that we can't retain a diverse group of people. And I'll sort of extend it out to people who are non-binary and transgender because, when we go down the social hierarchy, again, we're getting to the bottom, in terms of how those people are viewed and valued. So I have a couple of people who identify as non-binary. There's one person I work with who is transgender, and it's horrific out there. I've got a young man who approached me after a presentation I did who said, well, there's no way in the world I'd ever tell my guys that I work with that I'm gay. And so he goes out of his way to make them think that he is a straight cisgendered male because he is terrified of what they would say. So, all that tells me is that, I'm existing in an industry for 30 years that can't seem to, sort of change the way that we think, accept different people, and we're going to whinge and moan about a skill shortage and we can't find good people, and those good people are there and might be slightly different to how you look, feel, act and all of those things, but you're going to go, we need really good people, but not them, by virtue of the fact that we have this sort of bias. And I find it just so hypocritical and frustrating that we exclude people based on our, thought or judgment rather than just accepting the fact that they're probably going to be really bloody good at that job, but no, we're going to let that, sort of go. So I think we have a bit of a reckoning we need to do, and I think where we need to get to with the legislation piece is if this is as damaging and harmful and this can kill people, which we know that it can, why aren't we treating it the same as silica and asbestos? Why aren't we taking it to the next level to go, well, you know what, if we're serious about this, managers, supervisors, WHS advisors, I don't care who you are on the site, it doesn't bother me. You do training, and so you can't then whinge and complain afterwards when you're pulled up about your behaviour that you did not know. And so I think, we're moving into that space to go, if the industry is not going to regulate itself and be responsible, if we're not going to find that courage, if we're not going to put the steps in place to really start stamping this out, and Jacqui said it straight off the bat, it's up to the individuals on site, it's up to businesses to go, you need to be aware of this and you need to put things in place. You assess the risk. Can this, we have one young woman in our team and a team of 30 men. Is there a risk of this young woman being harassed? Absolutely. What are the things we're going to put in place? Now, if you're not going to do that yourself, then we make it mandatory that we tell you how you will do it. And so I think that as much as we like to lead with the carrot, sometimes you have to have the stick there as well. To sort of understand and go, this is a legal obligation. And I know that we're highly regulated. I know we've got rules for everything and everything else, but we're destroying people's lives and we're not allowing 50% of the population to work in our industry safely and have the same opportunities and the same experience as others. So, okay, industry, if you're not going to do that, then we come in and we make you do it because you can't whinge about something that we don't have. And then when those people turn around and wave you and go, look, I'd really love to work in the industry, but I don't feel very safe. Okay, let's change it then.
And we know the construction industry are leaking employees. And you spoke about retention.
168,000 people leave construction a year and we can't replace them.
168,000.
That is the build skills stat. That 168,000 people leave the industry a year and we can maybe get around 80,000 to replace them if we're lucky.
Do they do exit interviews? Do you
So,
know?
you can imagine what it is. It's all around the culture piece, right? Yeah, it's flexibility.
And that's ingrained and generational in that culture, and no doubt across
And
lots
that stat has been growing
lots
and
of
getting
work.
worse, right? So it's not like we've improved it. And another stat that's really concerning for me is in 2016, female participation in construction was the highest it ever was at 17% in 2016. Now, since that, it has been declining at a rapid rate in every state and territory. So on a national level, we now sit between 12 and 13. Depends where you get your stats from. So what's happened, and I'm not saying that 17% is great either, but something is fundamentally broken and wrong, that we're sliding backwards, and we can blame COVID to some extent, but we know that that's not the only thing. And so, yes, some things are getting better, but obviously some things are not, and we're not addressing it. And so I think we need to bring the focus back into that conversation to go, how come we can't keep people? Well, this is a big part of it.
What are the drivers for people leaving? And that's what, instead of looking at what are the drivers for people leaving the industry, we're looking at how do we get more people into the industry and keep them.
Yeah. Jacqui, I want to expand it out just with your expertise as Commissioner here in the ACT. What about workplaces that the employer doesn't control? Like when you've got a workforce, like in hospitality, like in care, in retail, where the perpetrator may be a client, a customer, if you like. Is there protections for staff around that?
So the protections are the controls that you have in place. So, for instance, if you and I've experienced, I actually experienced a young woman in a hospitality venue being sexually harassed by a taxi driver, and when she walked past the table, I just stopped her and I said, you don't need to put up with that. And she said, oh, he comes in every night and does that. And I said, well, have you spoken to your employer? This was before I started in this role. And she said, oh, I told him, but he just keeps saying to me, well, he's the client and, you've got to do everything for your customer. What's that old saying about
customers always right?
Yeah, customers always right. And I actually went in and spoke to the boss and said, that's not okay. And when that person comes, you need to go and serve them. Don't send her out. Oh, but he only comes for her. No. You have an obligation to protect her. Firstly, leaders of organisations have a really important role in creating a safe and respectful workplace. So the proactive way of addressing that is to ensure that there's a reporting mechanism, and that when that person reports to you that they have experienced sexual harassment from either a client, a customer, a consumer, that you address it immediately, that as a leader you ensure that your employees understand both the prevalence of sexual harassment, what it is, and that if it's a customer coming in and they treat your staff like that, there's a really easy option. It's your workplace. Tell them they're not welcome. Send them away.
Yep.
Tell them that they can't come back because of the way they're treating your workers.
Yeah,
we need to highlight people that do that. Workplaces that do that.
I agree, and I think the standard is the standard, and I don't think that shifts no matter who the person is. And look, I've got some runs on the board now. Like I said, I've got rhino skin, and also I just have complete intolerance for that sort of behaviour. And my partner and I were catching public transport a while ago, and saw a young woman who looked really uncomfortable, and there was a guy sitting too close next to her, and we asked her if she was okay, and she said no. And so we said, well, come and sit next to us. And so she got up and moved, and he just glared at us, and I glared at him, and I thought, mate, if you say one thing, it's going to be on like Donkey Kong. But it's a standard that you have to have day in, day. Well, I don't care anymore, and it's sort of, I've been through so much that I'm like, no, this doesn't happen anymore. What happened to me won't happen, if I'm there to anyone else. And so you do get to a point where it's like, I'm fed up. I'm fed up with the entitlement. I'm fed up with people who think they can behave this way. And so you do sort of reach that point. But I don't think it has to be something that has to be fluid or shifts and changes. The standard is the standard. It's not acceptable. End of story. And so I think that's where we need to get to. Stop making excuses for people's behaviour. Stop tiptoeing around it. The line is, this behaviour is not appropriate. It's not accepted here. You change it right now or you're not here. And whether it's a client, whether it's who cares,
and
like,
deal with it straight away.
Yeah.
So don't allow, don't. Yeah.
do not apologise for it too.
Exactly. So we talk about active bystanders, and there is active bystander training where everybody around who experiences, and, Jo, you gave that example about you being stuck in the toilet cubicle and everybody walking past while this incident occurred. That incident would not have been so prolonged, would not have had such a traumatic impact on you had somebody stopped it immediately.
The person that did, the guy that did stop that.
Jeff. Yep.
So that's an extraordinary. In that time, it must have been an extraordinary thing for you.
That was the first time in that. So I was 2.5 years in. So think about how many days I spent on site, how many people I came into contact with, the size of that site. And he was the first man to advocate for me in 2.5 years across multiple sites doing multiple jobs. So think about the timeline and some of the things that would have happened in that experience to get to that. And I sort of joke when I sort of say this and say I'm going to start getting bumper stickers, hashtag be like Jeff, to get people, because guys love it, right? And they're kind of like, I want to be Jeff. And I'm like, great, well, let's do that.
I want to be Jeff too.
Yeah.
I think we all need to. We can all take a lesson
Uncle
from
Jeff.
Jeff.
Uncle Jeff has been with me lifelong. So since that moment, that day that he stood up for me, he has been in my corner every step of the way. And it is powerful, powerful stuff. And what he doesn't realise, and he's this redheaded, Welsh, angry little man about my height. I think he's got short man syndrome a little bit. Very angry. He just has this mindset, and what he did is he actually brought that entire site together. He kicked those guys off site and said, you're not to ever come back on this site ever again. He put a formal complaint in with their company. He did this whole thing because I was terrified, and I'm like, please don't say anything. He brought that entire site together, over 200 people, and said, we're all people here to do a job, and we look after each other. If you don't like it, there's the door, there's the gate, leave. Simple as that. It wasn't gendered. It wasn't, Joe has to have this or Joe has to have that. It was simply we're people who are here to do a job. Let's look after each other. And that's his mindset. And so he doesn't always deliver it in the right way. He's like, I don't care what you are or where you're from. I'm like, oh, Jeff, you probably need to soften your language a bit. But that is his mindset. And he cannot fathom that other people can't think that way because it's a simplistic view. We're just people who are here to do a job. Let's look after each other, right?
Can I give you a good news story? Because I think we're talking all doom and gloom in a sense, and it's awful, and we all understand that. But I want to talk about a situation where there was a really positive impact on a construction site. It was in 2021, I think, where there was some construction going on around where our building is in Canberra. And some of my workers who were not in uniform walked past this construction site, and they were wolf whistled at. And obviously, I got told, and I was fuming. I was so annoyed that I actually stormed down to this construction site, and I asked to see the safety manager who wasn't there, and I said, call the safety manager. And so I said, look, this is what's just occurred to my people. You have an obligation to ensure not just that people on your work site are safe, but that anyone walking past is not exposed to, items falling from the site, but also sexual harassment. And so they were kind of a bit shocked, of course. And what they did, though, is they sent me all of the talking points for what they were going to use in their toolbox talks throughout the following week. And they gave every worker on the site a warning that if they were caught engaging in any form of sexual harassment, either to people walking past or to people on the site, they would be terminated immediately from the site. Now, okay, I'm the Work Health and Safety Commissioner, and so they were going to respond in that way. But that is what everyone should be doing. That's exactly what people should be doing, but they should be aware of what's going on. They didn't know that workers on their site were wolf whistling about women walking past, and they should know that. There should be safety people making those observations, but the way that they managed it was really, really well. And from my perspective as a PCBU, from then on, I had all of my workforce, including our admin workforce, wear, as a protective measure, uniforms to work that clearly said WorkSafe ACT.
Such a fascinating conversation. I thank you both for sharing so candidly your experiences, but your expertise. Any final thoughts?
I think for me, it's time that the industry stopped talking about wanting to change stuff and started actually changing stuff. And probably to echo Jacqui's point on a bit, more positive note, there are so many great people in construction who are advocating that and working towards that. And like I have said, and I'll repeatedly sort of say it, it's not everyone out there. It is a minority, but they're very vocal and they're very active. And the only way to shut that down is if we all stand together and say, enough, okay, enough. Whatever, we used to be able to joke about this, or it wasn't appropriate then. It just, we didn't have enough power or enough confidence to call it out, and now we do. And also, we're trying to make the industry better for everyone. And, those examples I gave about people who are a little bit in hiding, they don't want to show them their true selves. Like, can you imagine what it's like every day not being able to come to work as yourself, having this facade, having this wall, these things up because you don't feel safe enough to share who you really are. And so if we want the industry to get better, if we want to see more people come into the industry, which we so desperately need, if we want them to stay, how about we just give people a fair go and just stop all of this? Yeah, it's juvenile. It's really insidious stuff that doesn't need to play a part. And, when it comes to particularly young women, and the young women I see, they just want to do the job. They just want to love it and come and bring the best version of themselves and really knock it out of the park, because that's what they want to show, what they're capable of. So why don't we let them? Why don't we stop all this stuff and let them? Because we might actually be pleasantly surprised about where the industry can go. So for me, just, show some courage. Let's stand up to this stuff and stamp it out.
I'm interested in Build Like a Girl because you're supporting young women and girls going into the industry. Do you work with the men to make them louder?
Absolutely. And I had this conversation the other day with someone and they railed at me a bit about it. But what I said was, I've realised after, 5.5, we're coming into 6 years now that, almost Build Like a Girl has sort of been fully active in this space. And what I've realised is that it's not actually about empowering women. The young women and the women who are changing careers and the ones that I'm coming across at the moment are already empowered. They already go, I can do this. I don't need you to tell me I can do it. I think where this is empowering men to actually go, you know what, you can speak up. You can support us because I need you. I can't be the only one out here having these conversations. And so and when I said that, and I said, I actually think this work is about empowering men. And my friend was like, you've got to be kidding. And sort of, went on a bit of a rant. And I said, no. And I've had now a lot of feedback from guys who have come up to me and said, I didn't realise I could speak up because I thought I'd be stepping on toes, or maybe I'm taking up space or whatever. So unfortunately, I think we've sort of created a bit of an environment where, those good people out there who don't want to see this stuff happen, who don't accept it, who think it's abhorrent, don't feel like they can actually speak up. And so I think we need to do that and go, it's okay. And I'm not going to think you're stepping on my toes if you advocate for me. I'm bloody tired. And so I think it's really, really important that we do. And I know it sounds silly to say empower men in this space, but that's exactly what it is. And it's about empowering everybody to go, you know what, as soon as you speak up, they're going to speak up, they're going to speak up. It's a ripple effect, right?
We've
so
had a
let's
similar
just do
journey in relation to that, Jo, because I've also come to the conclusion. And so those men that are out there saying it's not me, they need to be out there saying you shouldn't be treating women like that.
Yeah, yeah. Or anyone, it's about all of us.
Absolutely. Yeah, anyone.
Yeah.
I think my final point would be that good organisational culture recognises that diverse and inclusive workplaces lead to better outcomes in all aspects of an organisation. And if workers know that their leaders place a high importance on respect and that their leaders demonstrate appropriate and respectful behaviour, it becomes part of everyday work day. That's what we need. We need leaders out there saying this is not okay, this is unacceptable. We will not put up with this kind of behaviour in our workplace for anybody.
Thank you both. And next time we'll get Jeff in the room. Please.
Be prepared to be angry Welshman.
Let's get Jeff on a podcast.
Thanks for joining this episode of Safety Spotlight. Thanks to our fabulous guests, Jo Farrell, Jacqui, Agius. And thanks, subscribe, get us where you get all your good podcasts. And until then, stay safe, support others, and I think as we've learnt from this episode, speak up.